No black man can buy this house legally. You're a drug dealer or a thief. On your knees, boy, before I put you there myself." Officer Reynolds stands at the gate, sneering at Darius Brooks, a black millionaire relaxing at his own pool in Ridgeview Heights in the Phoenix area. Darius is swimming in his $1 million home when two white cops show up to harass him. They demand identification, shove him against his gate, and handcuffs snap on. The encounter is brutal and humiliating. His white neighbor watches through her window as police destroy a successful black man on his own property, but she does nothing. Officer Reynolds has just made the worst mistake of his career. Darius has been ready for this moment. 12 hidden cameras are recording every racist word and every illegal move. And one phone call to one name is about to detonate these cops' entire lives. What happens next will end careers, expose secrets, and prove that justice is not dead. If you have ever been told you do not belong, this story will satisfy you. Darius Brooks had bought the house in Ridgeview Heights. It was a $1 million property with 5 bedrooms in a gated community. The pool had sold him on it, a kidney-shaped saltwater gem with sweeping desert views. He loved the house, but never quite felt at home there. He was a self-made man who had built a software company from a studio apartment near Phoenix and sold it before he turned 35. Early retirement had brought freedom. He wore a watch worth more than most cars and drove a Tesla, waving at neighbors who never waved back. Ridgeview Heights was overwhelmingly white. Darius knew that when he signed the papers. His realtor had warned him it was a very established neighborhood. Darius understood the dynamics but bought the house anyway. From the very beginning, Barbara Sutton's curtain started twitching. Every morning when Darius jogged past, that curtain moved. There was never a wave, only watching. Soon afterward, patrol cars appeared, rolling slowly past his driveway several times a day. They never stopped, but the surveillance was constant. Then the HOA complaints began. Excessive vehicles during dinner. 4 friends over. Loud music while watching a movie. Suspicious activity. Pressure washing his driveway. Every complaint was investigated and dismissed, yet the reports kept coming. Darius was not stupid. He had built his company from nothing, coding for countless hours in a studio apartment near Phoenix and selling it with more money than his parents had ever made. Combined. He knew exactly what was happening. When you are black and successful, people assume athlete, rapper, or criminal. Tech entrepreneur does not fit their script, so they stare. They question. They call the cops. Darius tried being perfect. He waved at everyone. He introduced himself at community meetings. He brought cookies to Barbara Sutton. She took them but never thanked him. He kept his lawn immaculate. He kept his music low. He kept his visits short. He made himself smaller, less threatening, less black. It did not work. The questions kept coming. At the community pool, it was always, "Are you visiting someone?" At the gate, it was, "Can I see your badge?" At the mailboxes, it was, "Which house again?" Always polite, yet always with that edge underneath. We are watching. Darius installed 12 cameras. The front gate had facial recognition. The driveway captured plates. The pool had 3 angles. There were views of the side yard, the street, the doorbell, the garage, and the backyard. Everything was in 4K resolution with cloud backup and motion alerts sent straight to his phone. The installer had asked if he was expecting trouble. Darius had smiled and said he was simply being careful. That same day, he called Nicole Lawson. He had met her at a tech conference years earlier. She was a civil rights attorney and a police misconduct specialist with more than 40 cases won. Darius explained the patrol cars, the complaints, the constant watching. Nicole was not surprised. She asked if he wanted to retain her just in case. She sent a retainer agreement. Darius signed it and paid a $20,000 advance. She gave him her cell number. If anything happens, call immediately. Do not answer questions. Just say my name. Darius memorized it. Nicole Lawson. 2 words that might save his life. The cameras recorded everything. Darius swam, grilled, read, and lived his peaceful, expensive, boring life. No incidents occurred. Darius relaxed. He thought maybe he had overreacted, and that the cameras had been overkill. Then, the gate buzzer sounded. Everything changed. Darius checked his phone. The security app showed 2 uniforms at his gate. His pulse kicked up with recognition. He pulled himself out of the pool, grabbed his towel, and walked to the intercom. On the screen stood 2 officers, one older with thick arms and mirrored sunglasses, the other younger and standing behind. Darius pressed talk. The Phoenix police needed to speak with him. He asked what it was about. They claimed a noise complaint and told him to open the gate. Darius glanced back at his pool. The only sound was water lapping against tile. No music played. The nearest neighbor was Barbara Sutton, 200 feet away, and the other house was vacant. He told them he had not been playing music. They insisted they needed to verify residence and ordered him to open the gate. The word "sir" sounded like a threat. Darius pressed release. The gate slid open. He met them in the driveway, water still dripping from his trunks, towel around his shoulders, the heat crushing. The officers approached. Their nameplates read Reynolds and Morales. Reynolds was in his late 30s with a buzz cut and linebacker arms. Morales looked younger and uncomfortable. Reynolds stopped 10 feet away and looked Darius up and down, taking his time. He asked if Darius lived there. Darius said yes. Reynolds demanded proof. Darius blinked. He asked why he needed to prove he lived in his own house. Reynolds wanted ID. Darius said his ID was inside. Reynolds' hand dropped to his belt. He asked why Darius needed to go inside. Darius reminded him that he had asked for ID and that it was in the kitchen. Reynolds told him to keep his hands visible and stepped closer. He warned Darius not to reach for anything. Darius lifted both hands. The towel slipped. He insisted he was not reaching and that they had asked for identification. Morales shifted. Darius noticed both body cameras were dark. No recording lights. They had been deliberately turned off. Darius kept breathing steady and asked if he was being detained. Reynolds moved closer. The smell of coffee and cigarettes was on his breath. He ordered Darius to turn around and put his hands behind his back. Darius asked for what? Reynolds claimed he was resisting and that he had asked a legal question. He repeated the order to turn around now. Morales spoke quietly, but Reynolds pulled out handcuffs. Darius did not resist. He turned slowly and put his hands behind his back. The cuffs snapped shut, tight, too tight. Metal bit into his wrists. Barbara Sutton's curtain moved. Darius saw it. She was watching and hearing everything. The curtain stayed open for a few seconds, then closed. Darius stood handcuffed in his driveway, water drying on his skin. His neighbor watching, 2 officers with their cameras off. Reynolds' hand tightened on him. He demanded to know who the homeowner was and sneered that guys like Darius did not own places like this. Morales looked away. Darius breathed slowly. He had been practicing this moment. 12 cameras were recording every word and every racist assumption. Darius spoke clearly and calmly. He wanted to call his attorney, Nicole Lawson. Reynolds's smirk faltered. Darius said the name quietly. Reynolds's jaw tightened. He keyed his radio and called for a supervisor. The radio crackled with a response that a lieutenant was on the way. Morales shifted nervously. Reynolds told him they would wait for the lieutenant. Darius stood there, handcuffed, patient, while the cameras kept recording, and somewhere downtown, Nicole Lawson's phone was about to ring. Darius stood handcuffed in the heat. Water had dried, leaving salt residue itching on his skin. His shoulders ached. He did not complain. He simply breathed slowly while Reynolds made calls, and Morales pretended to check the patrol car. The street was silent except for a distant leaf blower and the cicadas. No cars passed. No neighbors appeared. It was just Darius, 2 cops, and 12 cameras. Barbara Sutton's curtain had not moved again, but Darius knew she was still there. She could see him handcuffed and humiliated, probably wondering what he had done wrong. His phone buzzed with Nicole's pattern. She was coming. A black BMW turned onto the street and parked behind the patrol car. Nicole Lawson stepped out, a woman in her mid-30s wearing a dark suit despite the heat. She carried a briefcase and her phone. She did not hurry. She walked with the calm, measured pace of someone who had done this many times. Reynolds watched her approach. Nicole pulled business cards and handed one to each officer. She introduced herself as Nicole Lawson, civil rights attorney, and said she represented Mr. Brooks. She ordered them to remove the handcuffs immediately. Reynolds glanced at the card. His jaw tightened. He claimed his client had been resisting. Nicole corrected him that Darius had been answering questions. She warned that if they did not remove the handcuffs, she would file for false arrest before they left the property. Morales moved first, key in hand. Reynolds shot him a look but did not stop him. The cuffs clicked open. Darius brought his hands forward, rubbing his wrists. Deep red marks showed. Nicole photographed them from 3 different angles without asking permission. Reynolds's radio crackled that Lieutenant Hale was minutes out. Nicole looked at Darius and asked if he was okay. He nodded. She told him not to answer any more questions. She turned back to Reynolds and asked what the complaint had been. He said, noise disturbance. She pressed for the source. Reynolds gestured vaguely toward the pool area. When she asked for the complainant, he said it was anonymous. Nicole's eyes flashed. She pointed out that Darius had been swimming alone with no music and no guests. Either the tipster was mistaken, or the stop had nothing to do with noise. Reynolds said nothing. Nicole demanded the call log, time, caller information, and recording. She tapped her phone and said she would file it along with a formal complaint. She assumed both body cameras had captured everything. Morales' eyes widened. Reynolds' face hardened. He claimed technical difficulties and that the cameras had malfunctioned. Nicole typed and said she would need maintenance records and metadata showing when they were activated. An unmarked sedan pulled up. A man in plain clothes stepped out, early 50s with gray hair and a cheap suit. He moved with careful authority. It was Lieutenant Richard Hale. Nicole said quietly that he handled complaints and made them disappear. Hale approached with hands visible and palms open in a de-escalation gesture. He greeted them and suggested they figure out what had happened. Nicole laid it out. His officers had responded to a non-existent noise complaint, demanded ID from a homeowner in his own driveway, and when he exercised his right to ask if he was detained, they had handcuffed him, with both body cameras conveniently malfunctioning. Hale's smile did not reach his eyes. He claimed he understood there was confusion, apologized to Darius, and said the officers had been following procedure and that things sometimes get miscommunicated. Darius spoke for the first time in a while, his voice steady and cold. He repeated the word miscommunicated. Hale said they would be happy to discuss further, work something out, file a report, note the confusion, and let everyone move on. Nicole repeated the phrase, "everyone moves on," and asked how many times he had used it. Hale's smile froze. Darius told him there were 12 cameras recording the entire encounter from every angle, including Officer Reynolds' comment about guys like him not belonging. Reynolds went pale. Morales stepped back. Hale cleared his throat. He said that if there had been inappropriate comments, they would be addressed. Nicole pointed out that everything was recorded, along with timestamps showing both body cameras had been manually deactivated well before contact. She handed Hale her card and said all communication would go through her. Darius would answer no questions and sign nothing. She would be filing a formal complaint with Internal Affairs, the City Council, and the Civil Rights Division on Monday morning. The silence stretched. Hale took the card, looked at Darius, and the realization shifted behind his eyes. This was not going to stay quiet. He turned to the officers and told them it was time to go. Reynolds opened his mouth, closed it, and walked to the patrol car. Morales followed with hunched shoulders. Hale got into the sedan. The 3 vehicles pulled away. The street was quiet again. Darius asked Nicole if she had recorded everything. She confirmed he had captured every second from 12 angles in 4K with cloud backup. She told him they would work now. She pulled out a tablet and asked him to send all footage from every camera that night. Darius said he could do it immediately. Nicole looked at him and noted that he had been ready. Darius gestured at his house, his pool, and the driveway. He said he had known it was coming and that he was tired of being scared in his own home. Nicole nodded and said they would make sure it never happened again. Darius walked inside. The air conditioning hit like ice. Nicole set her briefcase on the kitchen island. Darius handed her water and showed her the cameras on his iPad. The security app displayed 12 feeds in a grid. He scrolled to the moment the gate buzzer sounded. Footage played. Darius was swimming peacefully alone with no music, only the sound of water. Then the officers appeared at the gate. Nicole watched intently. The cameras captured the conversation. Darius opening the gate. The demands. The handcuffs. Every word clear. Nicole paused and zoomed on Reynolds' body camera. The lens was dark. She noted the exact moment it went off. It had been deactivated immediately. No lights. Not an accident. Nicole resumed playback and watched Reynolds' face when Darius said her name. Recognition flickered. He had heard of her. Nicole confirmed he probably had, given her history of cases against the Phoenix Police Department, including settlements and a trial they had won. If Reynolds had been around, he knew her name meant lawsuits. Darius drank water. His wrists throbbed. He asked what happened next. Nicole said they would build the case, but first she met his eyes and warned that this would not be easy. The department would push back hard. Darius said he was ready. Nicole reminded him that once they filed, his life would change. They would investigate him, dig into his background, look for anything to discredit him, leak information, and plant stories to make him the problem. Darius said let them try because he had nothing to hide. Nicole nodded. She pulled a folder from her briefcase filled with documents, forms, and timelines. She explained what they were up against. Reynolds was not the problem. He was a symptom. The real problem was the system protecting him, including the lieutenant who had shown up to make the incident disappear, and the department that had been paying settlements quietly for years. Darius leaned against the counter. Nicole tapped the folder and said she would file the formal complaint with Internal Affairs, the City Council, and the Civil Rights Division. She would request records of every complaint against Reynolds, every settlement, every body camera malfunction. The department would fight, but Arizona had strong public records laws. They would turn over most of it eventually. Meanwhile, she needed Darius to write everything that had happened, every detail, what Reynolds had said, how the handcuffs had felt, what he had thought. She wanted it while the memory was fresh. Darius nodded. He would send the footage to her secure server, all 12 cameras with the full timeline. Her investigator would start analyzing it right away. Darius asked if she had an investigator. Nicole smiled slightly and said it was Paul Mitchell, a former FBI agent who handled police misconduct cases. He was excellent at finding things departments tried to hide, including metadata and digital forensics. It would be expensive. But Darius could afford it. She added that this was not just about him. If Reynolds had done this to Darius, he had done it to others. If the department had been paying settlements to keep people quiet, they were looking at a pattern and a system bigger than one bad cop. Darius looked at his hands where the red marks were fading. Nicole asked if he was sure he wanted this. He thought about standing handcuffed and humiliated while his neighbor watched and did nothing. He thought about Reynolds' voice saying guys like him did not belong. Darius said he was sure. Nicole extended her hand. They shook. She said then they would start. The doorbell rang. Darius opened it to find a man in his mid-40s with salt and pepper hair and wireframe glasses carrying laptop bags and equipment. It was Paul Mitchell. Nicole had sent him. Darius let him in. Paul set up in the dining room, spreading cables and hard drives. He needed full admin access to the security system and cloud credentials. Darius handed over the iPad. Paul plugged in and his fingers flew across the keyboard. He praised the setup. 12 cameras in 4K at 60 frames per second, with cloud redundancy and broadcast quality. Most people had doorbell cameras that barely caught plates, but Darius had perfection. Darius said he had wanted to be prepared. Paul pulled up the footage and watched it once at normal speed, then again at half speed, frame by frame. He did not speak for a long time. He took notes, zoomed in on details, and finally sat back. He showed split-screen views from 4 angles at the moment Reynolds and Morales approached. Both body cameras were visible and dark. Paul zoomed closer. The lenses showed no lights. They had turned them off before arriving. Paul pulled up code and metadata. He had pulled the equipment specs for Phoenix PD body cameras. They were Axon Body 3, tamper-proof with auto activation and backup battery. The only way both went dark simultaneously was manual override. Darius asked if he could prove it. Paul said he needed 48 hours. He noted they would file a preservation order, so the department would have to preserve all digital records, body camera logs, GPS from the patrol car, and radio transmissions. Any deletion after filing would be destruction of evidence. Darius asked what they were really looking at. Paul turned the laptop and showed a spreadsheet of names, dates, and case numbers. Nicole had asked him to research while she drove over. He had pulled public records, news archives, and court filings. Officer Reynolds had been with the Phoenix Police Department for some time and had accumulated 12 formal complaints. Every single one involved a person of color, not one white complainant. 9 had been marked unfounded after internal investigation. 3 had been resolved without discipline. But when cross-referenced with civil court, 2 complainants had filed lawsuits that settled out of court with sealed amounts. The city had been represented by its insurance carrier. Money had changed hands. Paul found something else about Lieutenant Richard Hale. He had been with the department for years and had worked in internal affairs. His job was handling complaints, investigating officers, and recommending discipline. In all that time, he had never recommended termination. Suspensions and retraining, yes, but never firing. Paul said Hale protected bad cops and managed liability. Bad cops cost money through lawsuits, settlements, and rising insurance premiums. Hale's job was making problems disappear before they became expensive. Pay a settlement. Make the complainant sign an NDA. File it as resolved and move on. That was not justice. It was math. Paul closed the laptop. The good news was that Darius was not taking a settlement and was not signing an NDA. They would pull back the curtain on how this worked. Darius's phone buzzed with a text from Nicole. She wanted him at the office. Paul said it was filing day. Nicole would submit the formal complaint and start the clock. The department would have 30 days to respond. Meanwhile, Paul would keep digging for patterns. One bad incident could be a mistake, but a dozen over time was a pattern. If they could show Hale had been covering up, that was conspiracy. Paul packed his equipment and left. He would call with a preliminary report. He reminded Darius not to talk to anyone from the department, not to post on social media, and not to tell neighbors. The less noise they made, the more evidence they could gather before the department circled the wagons. Darius sat alone. His wrists still ached. He looked at the fading red marks turning purple. 12 complaints, all involving people of color, all buried. He opened the security app and scrolled through the footage of his life recorded and backed up just in case. It turned out just in case had been exactly right. Darius arrived at Nicole's office downtown in Phoenix. The conference room table was covered with documents, printouts, and laptops. Nicole offered coffee and poured him a cup. She updated him that Paul had been busy. They had filed a preservation order and a judge had signed it. As of that point, the Phoenix Police Department was legally required to preserve all records or face criminal consequences. Paul pulled up files on the wall projector. He had accessed body camera metadata from the department's cloud backup before the order took full effect. The systems logged every activation, deactivation, and override. He highlighted lines showing manual overrides on both cameras well before contact, then reactivation minutes after they left the property. It had not been a malfunction. It had been premeditation. The Axon Body 3 required a specific sequence to deactivate. A press and hold of 2 buttons for 3 seconds. Department policy allowed manual override only for bathroom breaks or sensitive informant conversations, not routine calls. Violation number 1 was deliberate deactivation. Paul clicked to Reynolds' complaint history from Internal Affairs. 12 complaints, all involving people of color. Paul had pulled email records through public records requests. Most were redacted, but not all. One email chain from the department discussed a complaint involving Reynolds, recommending the standard resolution of a settlement offer, with an NDA required and counseling plus retraining. The chief of staff had approved routing it through legal and keeping it quiet. The union rep had asked questions because they could not afford another internal investigation. Nicole leaned forward. They were not investigating misconduct. They were managing public relations. Paul pulled a spreadsheet tracking settlement payments through the city budget under the line item for legal settlements and contingencies. Over several years, the city had budgeted these payments like expected business expenses. Lieutenant Richard Hale's signature appeared on every settlement authorization over a certain amount. He was not investigating complaints. He was budgeting for them. The room fell silent. Nicole finally spoke. This was not one cop harassing one homeowner. It was institutional and systematic. They had created a process for paying victims instead of disciplining officers. Darius asked if they could prove it. Nicole tapped the stack of documents, emails, settlements, complaint histories, body camera metadata, and Darius's 12 cameras capturing everything in 4K. She said they did not just have a case. They had a scandal. A blog post appeared online. Darius's phone began buzzing with unknown numbers. He ignored them, made coffee, and opened his laptop to dozens of new emails from unfamiliar addresses. One linked to an anonymous blog post titled something about the truth regarding Darius Brooks. It claimed he had a criminal record involving drug possession that did not exist. It alleged his company had been under investigation for fraud. It said he had filed lawsuits against previous employers and was always playing the race card looking for paydays. Every word was a lie, but the post included photos of his house, his car, and his license plate, plus a blurry shot of him leaving the property. The message was clear. They knew where he lived. They were watching. The comment section filled with racist and violent remarks. Darius stopped reading after the fifth one suggested someone should take care of the problem. His phone rang. It was Nicole. She had seen it. She told him not to respond or engage. This was exactly what they did. Character assassination to question his credibility before the real story came out. Paul was tracing the IP. It had been routed through a VPN, but originated from a city government IP range. Not conclusive yet, but suggestive. They were using taxpayer infrastructure to smear him. Nicole said they would prove it eventually. Meanwhile, Darius should forward every message and every threat and document them. Worse, 3 business contacts received anonymous emails with the same lies and insinuations. One client called immediately to check if it was garbage. Darius confirmed it was completely false and that he was dealing with police accountability they didn't like. The client offered support. 2 others simply stopped responding. Darius calculated the lost contracts. The pressure continued. The mortgage company called for a routine review and demanded updated financial documentation within days, even though payments had been on auto-pay without a single miss. They wanted proof of income, tax returns, bank statements, and investment portfolios for a high-value property. Darius sent everything. He knew they would find nothing, but the point was to make him anxious and doubt himself so he would quit. Then came formal mail from the HOA citing disruptive resident behavior and multiple concerns raised by neighbors regarding confrontational interactions with law enforcement. A board meeting was scheduled to discuss community standards and resident conduct. Darius read it twice. He called Nicole. She said they were escalating and that was good, because it meant they were getting to them. If they were not worried, they would have stayed quiet. Instead, they were trying smear campaigns, financial pressure, and HOA complaints. All of it retaliation and all of it additional evidence of obstruction and witness intimidation. Every action to silence him was another charge they could add. Nicole asked how he was holding up. Darius looked around his kitchen in the house he had worked years to afford, the place that was supposed to be safe. He said he was tired. Nicole knew, but she told him not to quit. That was what they wanted, a settlement and an NDA so the problem would disappear. That was Hale's playbook. Make it expensive, make it exhausting, make it go away. Darius said he was not going anywhere. Nicole said good because she had found something. Paul had tracked 3 other complainants who had filed against Reynolds and taken settlements. They were willing to talk off the record for now, but on the record if protected. One was a teacher and single mom. Reynolds had pulled her over for a broken taillight that was not broken, searched her car, and made her late to pick up her daughter. She had filed a complaint and been offered money to drop it and sign an NDA. She had been drowning in student loans and had taken it. Now, she wanted to help because she had been carrying the weight for years while watching Reynolds still on the street pulling people over. Her name was Denise Carter. 2 others, both black professionals, had been treated like criminals and thought they were alone. Now they knew they were not. Nicole paused and told Darius he had done that by refusing to be quiet, by having cameras, and by not taking the easy way. He had given others permission to come forward. The doorbell rang. Darius checked the camera. It was Barbara Sutton. He almost did not answer, because she had watched him handcuffed and done nothing. But something made him open the door. Barbara stood on the porch holding a folder, her hands shaking. She said she should have spoken sooner, and that she was sorry. Darius did not speak. She asked if she could come in. He stepped aside. She walked to the kitchen, set the folder on the counter, and opened it. Inside was a handwritten timeline, 3 pages with every detail of what the officer had said, what Darius had said, and what she had seen. She had watched the whole thing from her window, heard everything, and seen them handcuff him for no reason. She had not done anything because she had been scared, and because she had not wanted to believe police would do that. Not here, not in their neighborhood. But they had. She had been thinking about it every day since, imagining how she would feel if it had been her and someone watched and did nothing. She had taken photos through the window. They were blurry, but the timestamps matched Darius's cameras. She would testify if needed, and tell them exactly what she had seen. Darius picked up the folder and read the first page. The handwriting was precise and detailed. He asked why now. Barbara met his eyes. She said a lieutenant had visited her yesterday asking questions about Darius, whether he was a good neighbor, whether she had seen suspicious activity, whether he caused problems. He had not been asking because he cared. He had been fishing to build a case against Darius. That was when she realized this was not about him. It was about them covering their tracks. She did not want to help them. Barbara stood. She was 73 and had lived there for decades. She had called police only a couple of times in her life, and both times they had been professional and respectful. So she had never questioned them. She had never thought about how they treated others who did not look like her. She was ashamed it had taken this long, but she was here now. After she left, Darius sat with her folder. 3 pages, photos and testimony. One more piece of evidence from one more person who had decided not to stay silent. He had not been back in the pool. He could not explain why. The water was clean and the weather was perfect, but every time he looked at it, he saw himself standing in the driveway, handcuffed and dripping, while his neighbor watched from behind closed curtains. Legal bills were mounting. Darius could afford them. That was not the problem. The problem was watching the numbers climb and knowing this was exactly what Hale had counted on. Most people could not sustain the fight. Most ran out of money before it was over. Darius was not most people, but he was tired. The lost contracts hurt more than expected. Not the money, but the fact that people he had worked with for years believed anonymous blogs more than him. That stung. The HOA meeting was coming. Darius was not attending. Nicole would represent him. He knew what was coming. Neighbors who used to wave now looked away. The woman at the gate who once chatted about the weather now just scanned her badge without speaking. He had become the problem. The guy who made things uncomfortable and would not let it go. Sometimes late at night, Darius wondered if they were right. Maybe he should have taken Hale's offer, filed the report, accepted the apology, and moved on. Reynolds would still be a cop, but Darius's life would be normal again. No blogs, no legal bills, no sitting alone wondering if the fight was worth it. His phone rang. He almost did not answer. The woman's voice was unfamiliar. She introduced herself as Denise Carter. Nicole Lawson had given her the number and said it was okay to call. Darius sat up. She was the teacher. She wanted to thank him for not giving up and not taking the settlement. She had taken hers years earlier. It had felt like a lot of money at the time. She had student loans and a daughter who needed braces. They had told her if she signed the NDA, it would all go away. So she had. Her voice cracked slightly, but it had not gone away. She still saw police cars, and her heart raced. She avoided that part of town. She read the news and saw Reynolds' name in other cases, and thought she could have stopped this if she had been brave enough. Darius told her she had not been wrong to take the settlement. Maybe not, she said, but she had been wrong to stay silent. Nicole had told her Darius had cameras and video of everything, and that he was building a case not just against Reynolds, but against the whole system. That was the plan. Denise wanted to help. She would testify and break the NDA if she had to. She did not care anymore. Her daughter was older now. She was going to grow up in a world where cops like Reynolds existed. And she wanted her to know her mom had done something about it. They talked for some time. Denise told her story. Reynolds had pulled her over on a dark street with no cars. He said her taillight was out when it was not. He searched her car and made her wait on the curb while he ran her license. He made her late to pick up her daughter. She filed a complaint. Lieutenant Hale had called 2 weeks later, offering money to drop it and sign the NDA. She had thought she was the only one. That was what they counted on, keeping people isolated and quiet. But she was not alone anymore. Darius said no, she was not. After they hung up, Darius walked to the back door and looked out at the pool. The water was still blue and inviting. He opened the door, stepped outside. Heat hit him immediately. He walked to the edge, dipped a toe in. The water was perfect. Darius took off his shirt, walked down the steps, and let the water close over his shoulders. He floated on his back, eyes closed, sun warming his face. It was the first time in a while he felt like himself again. Not because the fight was over, but because he remembered why he was fighting. The first call came. A man named Anthony Lewis said he thought Officer Reynolds had done the same thing to him. By the end of the week, there were 8. 8 people, 6 black and 2 Latino, all professionals from Ridgeview Heights or the surrounding area. All the same story. A trivial complaint, an escalating encounter, a settlement offer, and an NDA. Nicole hosted a meeting at her office. Darius arrived early. The conference room had chairs arranged in a circle with coffee and water. Nicole's assistant set up a camera on a tripod for audio-only documentation. Everyone had to consent. The room filled. Denise Carter arrived first and shook Darius's hand. Anthony Lewis came next, a high school math teacher who looked nervous. Then Elena Vargas, a nurse. Then Robert Brown, Scott Parker, Jessica Ruiz, and Michael Anderson. Last was Barbara Sutton sitting quietly in the corner. 9 people and 9 stories. Nicole thanked them for being there and acknowledged it was not easy. Some had signed NDAs and had been told never to speak. But those NDAs had been signed under duress. What they were doing was not breaking contracts. It was exposing a pattern. She clicked a remote and Paul's spreadsheet appeared on the screen showing data on complaints, settlements, and body camera malfunctions, all involving Reynolds or officers with him, all covered by Lieutenant Hale. Total settlements paid were verifiable, and probably more were sealed. Total complaints were 17. Total disciplinary actions were 0. The room was silent. Nicole said they had not counted on Darius Brooks having cameras and refusing to settle. For the first time, they had evidence. Video, metadata, email chains, everything they had been hiding. She looked around and said she could not promise it would be easy. If they went on record, the department would come after them and question their motives. But if they stood together and showed this was a pattern and not isolated incidents, they could change things, not just for Reynolds, but for the whole department. Anthony spoke first and asked what they needed. Nicole said their stories on record, affidavits detailing what happened, the dates, the times, the names, what the officers had said, how they had felt, and what they had been offered to stay quiet. If it went to trial, some would need to testify. Denise said she would do it immediately. One by one, they agreed. 8 victims, 8 witnesses, 8 people who had carried this alone for years. They were not alone anymore. Paul pulled up a map of Ridgeview Heights and pins appeared showing locations where each incident had occurred, all within a tight radius. The same neighborhood, the same pattern. This was what systematic targeting looked like. Darius stared at the map with its 9 pins representing 9 lives disrupted by the same officer. The meeting ended. People exchanged numbers, promised to stay in touch, and formed a group chat they named the Ridgeview Accountability Coalition. Barbara stopped Darius on the way out. She said she had voted Republican her whole life, had never questioned police, and had never protested anything. But this was wrong, and she was too old to pretend she did not see it. Darius thanked her for being there and for making space for him. He watched her leave and watched the 8 others walk into the Phoenix night, knowing they were not fighting alone. Nicole stood beside him. She said he had done this. Darius corrected her that they had done it together. Nicole closed her briefcase and said now they would finish it. Paul found it. Darius's phone rang early. He needed to see something right away. Minutes later, Darius was in Nicole's office. Paul had 3 laptops open showing spreadsheets. He had been cross-referencing city budget records with court settlements looking for payment patterns. He pulled up the city of Phoenix budget line item for legal settlements and contingencies. Every city had one for potential lawsuits, like slip and falls or vehicle accidents. Phoenix budgeted a standard amount per year. But look at actual spending. They spent far less on normal settlements. The rest came from a different special fund account. Paul had filed a request with the city controller. They had sent an audit log. 5 years of transactions, dates, amounts, and authorization signatures. Every payment had the same signature, Lieutenant Richard Hale. He had been signing all of them. Paul pulled email records. Every email about a Reynolds complaint corresponded to a payment from this account within 30 days. He created a timeline. Complaint filed, settlement offer, NDA signed, payment out, case closed, over and over. The worst part was that this was not from an insurance carrier. It was taxpayer money direct from city funds. Hale was not just covering misconduct. He was using public money to do it. Nicole was typing rapidly. That was fraud, misuse of public funds, and if it had been systematic, it was conspiracy. Darius asked if they could prove intent. Paul pulled one more email dated earlier in which Hale wrote to the police chief about another Reynolds situation, noting they were running through the settlement fund faster than budgeted and recommending an increase in allocation. He called it a sustainable funding model. Nicole read the words aloud. Hale was not trying to stop complaints. He was budgeting for them to continue. The room went quiet. Darius thought about Denise Carter and the money she had taken, thinking she was the only one. She had not known there was a fund. She had not known Hale had done this many other times. She had not known her silence was just another line item in a budget designed to protect bad cops. This changed everything. Nicole agreed. This was no longer about firing Reynolds. It was about dismantling the system that had protected him, Hale, the department, and the city officials who had approved these budgets year after year without asking questions. Paul closed the laptops. He would keep digging to see if other officers had similar patterns. Nicole said they would go public with a press conference. All 9 victims if they were willing. Full evidence packet. They would call for a grand jury investigation. Not internal affairs or the city, but a real criminal investigation. Darius looked at the spreadsheets still on the screen. Nearly $300,000 over 5 years for 14 victims they knew about, probably more. They had built a machine for burying complaints and paying off victims. Nicole said yes, and they were about to break it. The grand jury room was smaller than Darius expected. He arrived with Nicole. Outside, news vans lined the street and reporters shouted questions. Darius did not answer. He walked through the doors, took the elevator, and entered the plain room with fluorescent lights and beige walls. 23 citizens sat in rows with notebooks open. The prosecutor stood at the front and the court reporter was in the corner. No defense attorneys. That was the rule. Darius took the seat at the witness table. Nicole sat in the back as an observer only. The prosecutor nodded and asked Darius to state his name. Darius Brooks. The prosecutor said he understood Darius had a presentation for the grand jury regarding the incident. Darius stood. No notes. He had practiced many times. For 47 minutes, every word came out memorized. He started at the beginning. He had been swimming in his pool alone. No music, no guests. Just him enjoying the afternoon in the home he had bought. His voice stayed steady and clear. 2 officers had arrived claiming a noise complaint. There had been no noise. Darius pulled out his phone and connected to the courtroom display. 12 camera angles appeared. These were his security cameras. 12 views in 4K resolution with cloud backup. They had recorded everything. He played the footage. Grand jurors watched in silence. Reynolds' voice came through the speakers. "Prove you live here." Then the words about guys like him not belonging. Darius paused the video. Officer Reynolds had assumed he was a criminal. Why? Because he was black. Because in Reynolds' mind, black men did not buy $1-million homes with clean money. Darius resumed. The handcuffs, the humiliation. Barbara Sutton's curtain moving. He had been detained while handcuffed in his own driveway. Both officers had turned off their body cameras well before arriving, manually and deliberately. Darius switched to Paul's analysis, metadata, manual override logs, device numbers, timestamps, proof of premeditation. This had not been a mistake. It had been a pattern. He showed the spreadsheet. 12 complaints, all people of color, all buried by hail. Officer Reynolds had done this before. 12 times they knew of. And every time Lieutenant Hale had paid victims to stay quiet using taxpayer money. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Grand jurors leaned forward. Darius showed the emails, Hale's words about standard resolution. Keep this quiet, sustainable funding model. They had created a system not to stop police misconduct, but to budget for it, to manage it, to make it sustainable. Darius's voice never rose. It did not need to. Reynolds was one cop, but Hale had protected him. The department had enabled him. The city had paid for it with public funds, with the jurors' money. Darius played Barbara Sutton's testimony, Denise Carter's, Anthony Lewis's, and the 8 victims' 8 stories. 8 times the system had failed. He was not there because he was angry. He was there because this was institutional, calculated, and it needed to stop. 47 minutes later, Darius sat. The room was silent. The prosecutor stood and invited questions from the grand jury. A woman in the second row raised her hand and asked if the other victims would testify. Darius said yes, they were willing. The camera footage was available in full, every second from all 12 angles already submitted. Another juror asked if the department had responded. They had offered a settlement and an NDA. Darius had declined. The room murmured. The prosecutor called the next witness. Barbara Sutton was nervous, but her voice was clear. She had watched from her window and seen everything. Darius had been polite. The officers had not. She was ashamed she had not spoken sooner. Then Denise Carter testified. Paul Mitchell gave technical analysis. The city controller was subpoenaed, confirming the settlement fund and Hale's signatures on the payments. Testimony finished by early afternoon. The grand jury deliberated. 90 minutes later, they returned. Indictments were issued. Officer Reynolds faced counts of official misconduct, false reporting, and deprivation of rights. Lieutenant Richard Hale faced obstruction of justice, misuse of public funds, official misconduct, and conspiracy. Warrants were issued immediately. Reynolds was arrested and pulled from his patrol car, handcuffed. Hale was arrested the next morning at home in a periwalk captured by news cameras. The police chief issued a statement that the department respected the grand jury process. Both officers were suspended without pay pending trial. They took the allegations seriously. Darius watched the news that night. Reynolds in handcuffs. Hale's mugshot. Headlines about the grand jury indicting 2 Phoenix officers and exposing a systematic cover-up with a settlement fund revealed. His phone rang. It was Nicole. She said they had won. Darius corrected her. They had started winning. The trials were next. Nicole agreed, but today was justice. Darius hung up. He walked to the back door and looked out at the pool. The water was still perfect. It was his. He smiled. The city terminated both officers. They were officially fired. Severance was denied. Pensions went under review. Hale's criminal trial was set with 3 felony counts. His attorney filed motions to dismiss. The judge denied every one. Reynolds took a plea deal, pleaded guilty to 2 counts of official misconduct, avoided trial, and received 18 months plus 5 years probation. He would never work in law enforcement again. The police chief announced reforms. The city council passed a resolution making body cameras mandatory with no manual override except for bathroom breaks. An independent civilian oversight board was created with 9 citizens who had real power to investigate and required public reporting of all complaints and settlements plus annual audits. It was not perfect, but it was different. Darius returned to the pool on a Friday afternoon at the same time as that day in June. He floated on his back, eyes closed, sun warming his face. Barbara Sutton waved from her window. This time the window stayed open. The cameras were still recording. Darius had not turned them off and probably never would. But now when he checked the footage, it was just him swimming, living, and existing in peace. No handcuffs, no humiliation, no officers telling him he did not belong. They had seen a black man who did not belong. He had shown them 12 cameras and the truth. And the truth had not just gotten them fired. It had gotten them indicted, reformed a department, and given 8 other victims their voices back. 1 phone call, 1 name. Nicole Lawson. That was all it had taken. If this story moved you, if you have ever been told you do not belong somewhere, you earned your place, hit subscribe. Share this. Let people know that accountability is not dead. It just needs evidence. Justice is not loud, but it is patient. And sometimes one person with cameras and courage is enough to change a system. In the quiet moments after the handcuffs came off, and Darius Brooks stood once more in his own driveway, a profound life lesson rises from his story that touches something deep inside every one of us who has ever felt unseen or unwanted. True courage is not the absence of fear. It is the quiet decision to refuse to shrink yourself when the world tries to push you out of a place you have rightfully earned. Darius did not storm into that confrontation with rage or despair. Instead, he had spent years preparing in silence, installing those 12 watchful cameras, saving every frame of evidence, and keeping a fierce advocate like Nicole Lawson ready on the other end of the line. When the officers sneered that a man like him did not belong in his beautiful Ridgeview Heights home, he chose dignity over defeat. He refused the easy settlement and the hush money that would have kept him quiet. What moves me most is how one man's steady stand did not just protect his own peace by the pool. It cracked open an entire broken system that had silenced so many others before him. His courage gave Denise Carter and 8 more voices the strength to finally speak their painful truths, turning isolated pain into a shared fight for justice. That is the beautiful, heartbreaking gift of this story. Your refusal to stay invisible can become the light someone else desperately needs. It proves that preparation meets courage to create real change. The justice may feel slow and exhausting, but it becomes unstoppable when good people decide enough is enough. If Darius's journey stirred something in your heart, if you have ever been told you do not belong in a neighborhood, a job, or even in your own skin, let this be your reminder that your dignity is worth fighting for, and your stand can ripple far beyond your own life. Now tell me in the comments, what would you do if this happened to you? Would you stay silent or find the courage to push back? Drop your thoughts below. I read every single one. And if these stories of resilience and real accountability move you, hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on notifications and join us for more powerful tales that remind us justice is still worth believing in. Share this with someone who needs it today. See you in the next one.